Hello grade 8 students! For today, we will be discussing converse, inverse, contrapositive, and biconditional statement. In today's learning target, you should be able to write conditional statement into converse, inverse, contrapositive, and biconditional statement. Let's have converse statement. When we say converse statement, it can be obtained by switching the hypothesis and conclusion. Converse is denoted by Q implies P, read as if Q then P. Take note that the converse of a true conditional statement may either be true or false. Let's have an example. We have here a conditional statement. If the angles are adjacent, then they have a common side. Our hypothesis here, angles are adjacent. Our conclusion would be they have a common side. If we want to convert this one into a converse statement, we need to switch the hypothesis and the conclusion. So it will become, if the angles have a common side, then they are adjacent. Next, let's have inverse statement. When we say inverse, it is the resulting statement when both the hypothesis and the conclusion are negated. If the original statement is P implies Q, then its inverse is denoted by not P implies not Q, read as if not P, then not Q. So let's have an example. Here I have a conditional statement. If the angles are adjacent, then they have common side. We want to negate our hypothesis and conclusion. So for our inverse, if the angles are not adjacent, then they do not have the common side. That is our inverse statement. Next, let's have our contrapositive statement. So it is the converse of the inverse statement of a conditional statement. If the original statement is P implies Q, then its contrapositive is denoted by if not Q implies not P, read as if not Q, then not P. So for example, I have here a conditional statement. If the angles are adjacent, then they have the common side. So for our contrapositive, we will negate our hypothesis and conclusion, and then we will also switch them. So if the angles don't have the same side, then they are not adjacent. So this is how we create inverse, converse, and contrapositive statement. Let's try on this given example. For our conditional statement, if the points are collinear, then they lie on the same line. For the converse statement, we are just switching our hypothesis and conclusion. So it will become, if the points lie on the same line, then it is collinear. Next, let's have our inverse. We will negate our conditional statement. So it will become, if the points are not collinear, then they don't lie on the same line. And lastly, for our contrapositive statement, we will just be getting the converse of our inverse. So we will just be switching our inverse statement. So it will become, if the points don't lie on the same line, then they are not collinear. Now let's determine the truth value of these sentences. For our conditional statement, we know that all collinear points lie on the same line. Therefore, this is true. And we know that if the points lie on the same line, it is also collinear. Therefore, it is also true. So we can say that our inverse and contrapositive are also true. So these statements are all true. Let's have our next example. Conditional statement. If the angles are supplementary, then they form a linear pair. For our converse statement, we will just be switching the hypothesis and the conclusion. So it will become, if the angle forms a linear pair, then they are supplementary. For our inverse, we will just negate our conditional statement. So it will become, if the angles are not supplementary, then they don't form a linear pair. And for our contrapositive, we will just get the converse of our inverse statement. So it will become, if the angles don't form a linear pair, then they are not supplementary. Now let's determine the truth value of the following statement. For our conditional statement, we know that supplementary angles are sometimes linear pair. Therefore, it is false. For our converse statement, we know that our linear pair is always supplementary. Therefore, this is true. For our inverse, we know that not supplementary angles don't form a linear pair. Therefore, this is also true. And for our contrapositive, if the angles don't form a linear pair, then they are not supplementary. So this is false. So that is how we create conditional statement, converse statement, inverse statement, and contrapositive statement, as well as how to identify the truth value behind the statements. Now we have here the truth value if you are confused with our true or false statement. So if our hypothesis is true and our conclusion is also true, therefore the conditional, converse, inverse, and contrapositive will always be true. If the hypothesis is true but the conclusion is false, therefore the converse and the inverse will be true, but the conditional and the contrapositive will become false. And if the hypothesis is false and our conclusion is true, therefore the conditional and the contrapositive are true, but the converse and inverse are all false. And if the hypothesis and the conclusion are all false, then our conditional, converse, inverse, and contrapositive statement are all true. Now let's have our last statement, which is the biconditional statement. When we say biconditional statement, it is a combination of a conditional statement and its converse written in the if and only if form. Biconditional statement is denoted by P implies Q and Q implies P, read as P if and only if Q. So here we have a conditional statement. If two angles are adjacent, then they have common side. When we convert this one into converse, it will become, if two angles has a common side, then they are adjacent. We know that our conditional and our converse statement are all true. Therefore, we can transform these sentences into biconditional statement. It will become, two angles are adjacent if and only if they have a common side. So that is how we create a biconditional statement if the conditional and the converse statement are both true. Now it's your turn. Let's try to convert or to write the following sentences into biconditional statement. Pause the video for a while and I will reveal the answer afterwards. So for number 1, an angle is right if and only if it measures 90 degrees. For number 2, points are collinear if and only if they lie on the same line. And lastly, angles are congruent if and only if they have the same measurement. Now it's your turn. Pause the video for a while and get the conditional, the converse, and the inverse and contrapositive statement of the following sentences. Here are the answers on our exercises. For number 1, transform the sentence into a conditional statement. So, if a polygon has exactly 4 sides, then it is a square. For number 2, transform the sentence into a converse statement. So, if a number is divisible by 6, then it is also divisible by 2. For the third sentence, convert the statement into an inverse statement. So if you don't exercise daily, then you will not be healthy. And lastly, number 4, convert the statement into a contrapositive statement. If the angles are not congruent, then they are not vertical. If you got all this correct, congratulations! For our individual activity, write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of the following conditional statement, then identify its truth value. Pause the video for a while and I will be showing you the correct answer afterwards. Here are the key to corrections on our individual activity. So the converse would be, if the polygon has 4 sides, then it is a square. The truth value is true. For the inverse statement, if a polygon is not square, then it doesn't have 4 sides. The truth value will become true. Contrapositive statement, if the polygon doesn't have 4 sides, then it is not a square. The truth value is true. For the second sentence, our converse will be, if the points are coplanar, then it lies on the same plane. The truth value is true. Inverse, if the points doesn't lie on the same plane, then they are not coplanar. Truth value is true. Contrapositive statement, if the points are not coplanar, then they don't lie on the same plane. The truth value is true. Thank you, that's all for today. Do not forget to access your Quipper accounts for a short assessment. Don't hesitate to ask Sir Alex and Miss Ria for further questions. God bless.